record. Randall, welcome for coming to discuss RPL. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with all things RPL.
Thanks, Colleen.
Can we start off by, I'll just let everyone know too, we'll ask a series of questions. If you have some other questions on the topics that we are discussing, please feel free to put the questions in the chat, and then we'll have a bit of a group discussion towards the end. And there certainly will be the opportunity for you to ask those questions. So Randall, can we start off, I'd like to ask you, can you provide a short overview about what is an RPL?
Yeah, great. So RPL stands for Recognition of Prior Learning. And what it means is that it is a pathway under the Australian qualification framework to obtain a qualification. So in Australia, there's two pathways. There's the traditional model, which is training and assessment, which we're all familiar with, where you enrol in a course, you study it, you complete the assessments, whether it be an exam or an assignment, but there is two parts to it, a training and assessment, with the outcome being a qualification. The other pathway is called Recognition of Prior Learning, which is the same outcome, exactly the same qualification is issued. It's how you navigate through the system to obtain the outcome. Now, with Recognition of Prior Learning, it's putting together a portfolio of evidence, or building a brief. Reverting back to my old policing days, instead of building a brief of evidence, we're building a portfolio of evidence to be able to demonstrate that a person is competent to certain levels, and we align that competency with different qualifications. So it's just simply a pathway under the qualification framework to obtain a qualification.
Great, thank you. Tell me about, how did you get into the business of RPLs? When you left Queensland Police, what led you to doing, why RPLs?
Yeah, okay, great question. So a little bit background about myself. I joined the Queensland Police in 1989. I was 21. I saw myself being a member of the police service and retiring at 60, which is the age requirement here in Queensland. I had no other desires but to be a police officer. I had my whole life mapped out that I hoped that I would have obtained a commissioned rank, but I never saw myself doing anything else. And I was very lucky. I had lots of opportunities when I was in the service. I was able to obtain a position. My desire from an early age was to become a detective, and I achieved that. Did about 3 or 4 years in uniform, became a detective, and progressed through the ranks. I was able to get promoted to detective sergeant early, and that gave me some opportunities to travel overseas and do some training in Indonesia. And then I was successful in obtaining a Churchill Fellowship, which is basically like a scholarship to travel to the US. And I worked with the DEA for a period of 8 weeks, studying over there and applying some knowledge in the field of drug investigations. I was in the drug squad at that stage. And unfortunately, what happened next was that I had a challenge with PTSD, and found myself in a situation where the service decided that I was no longer fit to be a member of the service, and that I needed to go through a medical retirement. So 16 years service, my career that I had planned for the next 40 years had came to a screaming halt. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. And this happened in 2005. So there was no transition programs. There was no support. It was very clinical. It was basically, on this day at this time, you're no longer a member of the service. And I was left to go and fend for myself. And it was through having a conversation with my wife at that stage about, well, what did I want to do from here? And I could do anything. I found myself, Seek wasn't online at that stage. We were still using the local papers, and I was laying on the bed one day just circling security guards, because I thought the only job I could see myself doing was maybe carrying a string of keys, wearing a gun and a badge on the chest, and rattling doors. And I couldn't see that my policing experience, and by that stage I was an acting senior sergeant, I just couldn't see how that could translate in the civilian world. And I just thought the only thing that I can do is be a security guard. What she suggested was, why don't I go and see a career counsellor? Now, the last time I'd seen a career counsellor was in grade 12, where they had a book. They opened it up and said, what do you want to do? And I knew I wanted to be a police officer. So I was already on the path to achieving that. So here I am now at 36. What did I want to do now that when I grew up? And I thought I'll go see a career counsellor. And when I saw the counsellor, they don't have a book anymore. It wasn't like that they were going to say, okay, what do you want to do next? But he had a couple of good questions for me. One was, what are two of the most challenging things you have at the moment? I said, I've lost my identity and I've lost my credibility. I said, I've been known as Randall Smith, the Detective Sergeant, for the last 16 years. I was known by my badge and by my position. And I've also lost my credibility. I felt that I had completed all of these internal courses in the police that allowed me to get promoted early. And it was all recognised within that work environment. But as soon as I stepped out of that, I had no nationally recognised qualifications. I still didn't know what I wanted to do as a job, but I just knew that I had nothing compared to what everybody else that I knew that was a civilian had. And so he said, well, have you heard of recognition of prior learning? Now, I said, yeah, I do. I know what recognition of prior learning is about. I said, the police, I've done all the police courses. Recognition of prior learning is something that they've talked about. It was never offered in the police. I was just told that you're doing a course on Monday, turn up at the academy, you do the course, regardless of if you've had 5 years experience in that sector or industry, you just went and did the course. So he said, well, go and see a college on the Gold Coast and talk to them about getting your skills recognised, because I'm sure you can get some qualifications. So I contacted this college on the Gold Coast and I went and spoke to the director there and I presented my case. I put forward, I went to them and said, I want to get some qualifications. They gave me an RPL kit. Now the kit's about 300 pages. It's designed to be really cumbersome and people look at it and go, this is too hard. I might just go and do the course. But I looked at it and went, I can see what they're talking about here. I just need to build a brief and prove that I'm competent. I know how to gather evidence. I know how to map it against elements. I know how to prove something. All I need to do was just, rather than proving someone's guilt, I just had to prove that I was competent. And I went before the board and they, at the end of it, they awarded me with 3 diplomas. I was actually blown away. I was probably at the lowest of lows at that stage. And all of a sudden, my credibility was coming back. And I found myself with, wow, this is amazing. And so at the end of the meeting, the director said to me, can I have a chat with you outside? And I said, yeah. He said, what are you going to do now? And I said, I have no idea. He said, why don't you do for others what you've just done for yourself? And I said, mate, I haven't heard of it before. And he goes, if I had the opportunity again, I would create a business where you go out and help people get their skills recognised. And he said, we will issue the qualifications. You go find the clients, you go and gather the evidence, present them to us. And if you can prove they're competent, we'll issue the qualifications. And so I remember jumping in the car. I'm over the moon because now I've got 3 diplomas. I couldn't believe that my 16 years in the police meant something. And then I said to my wife, you're not going to believe this. This guy said we should think about doing this for others. And she said, I've never heard of it before. And I said, no, it doesn't exist. But this is an idea. And to be honest with you, Colleen, I had nothing else to do. I had no idea what we could do. So we took the next 8 weeks to think about how do we set up a business. My wife at that stage was a Crown prosecutor with the DPP. So she was a barrister. She had no business experience. I had no business experience. We sat down and wrote a business plan. And we decided that on the 1st of January 2006 that we would open up a business and help people get qualifications through recognition of prior learning. Now, it'll tell you how naive we were. Nobody starts a business on a national public holiday. But I'd worked 16 years, every public holiday. It meant nothing to me. The phone didn't ring on the first day of trading. But then it did start to ring and it was through word of mouth to start with. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to my friends and colleagues that were in the police that were exiting and defence members. And then it opened up from there. Within 3 months, we outgrew our home office, which was a desk in the corner of the bedroom, to having to get office space. And now we're in the start of our 17th year. We've helped thousands of clients obtain nationally recognised qualifications from all different walks of life. And Churchill Education was formed. That's the story. It comes from a true story of I'm in the same position now with the clients that are coming through Fordham. I've walked the path. I've spoken to people from many different walks of life, not just first responders, but anyone that's transitioning. And it's been an interesting journey over the last 17 years to see that when I joined the police in '89, nobody left. It was you're in there for life. But nowadays, people are moving on. We're seeing the private sector, people will move between 2 to 5 years. They'll leave their careers and take another option. And the same thing's happening in the first responder environment. People are maybe putting in their 5 or 10 years in the police and then going off and doing something different. And then it's now about leveraging that experience and getting their skills recognised. And that's where we come and step forward.
Yeah. So much gold in that, Rachel. Thank you. The first thing is, well, congratulations on that the business has gone so well and that you've helped so many people. And I think the story that you've just told there really demonstrates and rings true to so many of the people that we work with, in that they will wonder, what can I do with the skills and experience that I've learnt whilst I've been in service, and how do they actually even translate out? So you've just explained that and demonstrated it beautifully. So thank you. The second thing I just wanted to point out too is you mentioned also the Churchill Fellowship. So I just want to clarify that the Churchill Education and the Fellowship are two separate things.
Two totally different companies. We were inspired by, both my wife and I received Churchill Fellowships in the same year, which was one of the rare things for the organisation. At that stage, our company name was called Train to Succeed, and we actually traded under Train to Succeed for 5 years. But we felt that we'd actually outgrown the name, and we were looking for a strong name that had some connection with us. And Churchill Education is purely a company that we created. There's no connection with the fellowship. However, we still encourage people to seek and apply for the Churchill Fellowships, because there are so many opportunities of where you can go and travel overseas to bring back information and knowledge to Australia.
Absolutely, there are, yeah. So can you share with us some of the benefits that you've seen people gain by submitting for their RPL, and, how has it benefited their career?
Yeah.
Any great case stories you can tell us? I'm sure you've got plenty.
We've got plenty of case stories, and the great thing is that they are on our website under the blog section. But one that I just picked out, there was one Queensland police officer who was a detective sergeant in the child protection unit, and he moved out of that after a number of years, and now is working in a work health and safety role within the mines. But to progress through to that stage, he actually worked as a CEO for one of the rugby league clubs in Queensland. Now, totally different, no connection between policing, rugby league CEO, and now working within a WHS role, a senior role within the mines. However, what he did do was leverage his experience from his policing days with his leadership, his management, communication skills, used our service to get that into the form of a nationally recognised qualification. And then this is within the last 10 years, he's progressed through a couple of different nearly career pivots, I suppose, in that there are so many opportunities out there that when he left, he never saw himself leading. He probably thought that the CEO of a rugby club was something unique, where he was had budgets, the financials, the leadership team to run. He did that for a period of time and then saw another opportunity. So it all becomes a stepping stone to where to from here. If we think back to our early days, and I say this my story, and I thought I was going to be in for 40 years. I had no desire to do anything else. There's a lot of people that we will have a number of careers, and from into each of those careers, we will use the knowledge that we've gained in our prior work experience. Where the qualifications came in that gave him some great benefit was when you're applying for positions, and if we have a look on SEEK, for example, a lot of the jobs will say minimum requirement, diploma of leadership management, or minimum requirement cert for work health and safety. You may have had a heap of experience in your previous roles as a first responder in leadership and management. However, when you're applying for these positions, you need to get through the gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper's role is to shortlist, and they're going to be looking for not only a great cover letter and a great resume, but if the person doesn't put forward that they hold that essential criteria being one of the qualifications, it's through at times being able to get past that gatekeeper, and then they can step forward and sell themselves into that role. So the qualification, the actual physical piece of paper, the qualification carries so much value now in opening doors. And that story just blew me away, because I knew this guy when he was a young constable. I was so rapt that he became a CEO. Like, it was just a huge stepping from the career that I thought he would do. And then to hear from him again and go, you know, I've achieved what I want to achieve here. And I've got these qualifications from my policing days, and also we assisted him in his CEO role, that he stepped into another sector that was something that I would never have thought that he would be at, and he's succeeding there as well. So
yeah, I think that one great point you just made there early on is leveraging experience.
Absolutely.
That is such a crucial part of the transition process of leveraging that unique skills and experience that so many employers are looking for, that you know, the first responders are able to offer. So for any of our participants that are interested in applying for RPL, what's in it for them? Why would they do this? Why would they go through the process of providing their resume, submitting it all, and going through, and then potentially providing additional evidence?
Yeah.
How does it benefit them?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. One is, I'm going to go back to my story's credibility. I had no credibility in my mind, because I'd been stripped of those, all the internal courses I had done. So the benefit for them is it puts them on a level playing field with those that they're competing against. A lot of employers in the private sector, they will tell you that they know that there's been a huge investment in training of first responders. We get courses thrown at us left, right and centre. We get opportunities to not only do those courses, but then apply that knowledge in the workplace. They're aware of that. However, when you ask them, okay, what does a police officer do? What does a firefighter do? What does an SES worker do? They'll tell you that they're a shortened version of, coppers just write tickets and the fireys just put out fires. And we go, there's a hell of a lot more to it than that. What they do know, or what they've got to compare, is that they have team members that are on their team already, who they may be looking for another person to fill a management role or a supervisory role. They're only going to look at John that's in that role, and he holds a diploma in leadership management. They're going to base their, someone that's going to come in to be working beside this person. Well, we're going to look for someone with a diploma in leadership management. What they don't realise is that that senior constable or that sergeant or the fire officer already had that skill set, but they just didn't have that formal qualification. It puts them on a level playing field, because they're really just trying to go, well, what's like for like? It's then when they get in there for the interview to sell themselves, and that's when the private sector, we still hear some great stories about people that have undersold themselves, and I think that's another thing that recognition of prior learning is great, is having someone independent looking at you. Because the first question I ask people is, tell me what they do. And most people just say, look, I just do it. I just go and I do the job. I just do it. And then, well, tell me about that. What does that look like?
And they're really unpacking it a bit.
And you unpack it. And you go, mate, you're doing it just a bit more than just doing it. And they become the nuggets of gold, Colleen. And that's what we use in that evidence gathering. And we steer them off. And yes, at times it can be a little bit, we need a little bit more, because ultimately, the qualification that we issue is a nationally recognised qualification. It's accepted by employers and industry. It's also accepted by universities. So you might obtain a diploma with us to fast track your entry into a tertiary qualification. So some people are saying, I can come through Churchill, and don't forget, we are only one of 4,500 registered training organisations in Australia. So every registered training organisation must, as part of their registration, offer RPL. They can, the way they offer it and whether they embrace it are two different things. Most RTOs will say, yes, we have to offer it to you. Here's your 300-page kit. Go away and fill it out and come back to us. And they know that people will look at it and go, this is too hard. I'll just go and do the course. We're different. We've made a model around taking away the too hard aspect. But yes, there are some hoops to jump through, and there has to be, because the qualification that's issued is exactly the same as the one that comes out from the training assessment model. If you can do a qualification with us through RPL and obtain it in 14 to 28 days, and then look at perhaps going on to doing some tertiary study, you're getting advanced credit into those bachelor qualifications. It sometimes it cuts off 12 months and more of a bachelor program.
I can speak from my own personal experience many years ago, when I did study in human resource management. That's exactly what I did. I applied for RPL and it literally cut 12 months off my study.
Yeah, and also if you think about the course fees for tertiary,
absolutely.
My kids are going through uni at the moment, and it's not cheap. There's a saving on time and also on costs if you're looking at going down that path. There's different reasons why people come through and obtain qualifications. And also, I think it's important to note that the clients that we also service are not always leaving the police, or not always leaving the first responder roles. They're looking at how can they stand out from the crowd. And if we're all doing the same courses and we're all given the same opportunities internally, and we're all competing for limited jobs at times if you're wanting promotion, one of the ways that we are seeing some of our clients stand out from the crowd is that they're getting their skill set recognised through RPL. Those qualifications are then listed on their internal training history. They're referencing them in their applications, and it might be that little piece of the puzzle that might take them through on a promotion opportunity, and it certainly gives them the opportunity to look outside of life after the job, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that just to add to that a little bit, which is sort of touched on before, and that is it's interpreting what you do in your role as a first responder, as a police officer, and how that translates into the business world. And so the RPL actually translates it. So when in the business world, they say, oh, you can do that.
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
And then also, I think I know from some of the participants that I've worked with, of when we're mapping out the goals of things that they want to achieve, and they're identifying what qualifications that they need to achieve that, then RPL comes into that as well. That's when we send them your way.
Yes. Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit about what the process is? How does somebody submit for an RPL? How long does it take? What sort of paperwork do you need? And what sort of outcome can they expect?
Great question. So the model that we use is that we first of all provide a free service to clients. We want to first of all make sure that we're the right fit for them. In Australia, there are 900 different qualifications in the vocational sector. So from your certificate ones up to your graduate diploma. So there's a very broad spectrum of qualifications, but we only offer around about 60 qualifications. So the first question we go through is, what is it that the individual is trying to achieve? We may not be the right fit because we can't issue that qualification. So that's the very first conversation that I would ask them, is that, where do you see yourself going? We will always guide them off in the right direction. So navigating to find a provider who can help them with that specific qualification is the first thing that we want to make sure, because we're not the right fit for everybody. Then we would talk to them about their experience, because every recognition of prior learning application is unique. It's based on that individual, because none of us have done the same thing, or we'd be terribly boring if it was. But we go through and work with them about, tell me about yourself, your background, where do you see yourself going? And then from there, how do we go about proving that you're competent to certain levels? And we guide them on where they can go and find examples of their past experience. So police, defence, and other emergency services are great, because every course you've done is logged on a training history record somewhere. So they're usually able to go and get a printout from of their training history. They're usually able to go and get a printout of where they've been stationed or deployed. There's usually an internal record somewhere that we can guide that individual on where they can go, and that starts to build the proof that we need. So we know the courses that they've done. We know the position descriptions. Position descriptions are great. We hold a lot on file, but we're always asking people, bring back a copy of your position description, because it's within that we can really drill down and find out that you're not just a general duties police officer. You've done something different here. Yes, you have some of the foundation core strengths that all on that rank do, but you've had different experiences. That's why the outcome for some people is different to others. We ask them to provide us copies of previous courses that they might have completed. So they'll have, whether it's a accredited version, which is like a certificate, or a non-accredited, which might be just like a completion statement or something along those lines. But we're trying to build this brief around their history. And what we are asking them to do is upload that information into a secure link to us, and our team then go and pull it apart and look through it and identify what qualifications might be a fit. If there are gaps, we then go back to the individual and say, look, you're very close on this qualification, but there's a couple of gaps here. Can you go and find me an example of when you've done X, Y, Z? And we'll talk to them about what it might look like. And sometimes it comes down to just labeling it. They might call it something. I know from the training package says, for us to sign off against this unit of competency, you need to demonstrate this. And when we're explaining it to the individual, they can, if through conversation, they'll grasp, oh, you mean when I was in this role and I was doing it this way, and we call it that. Yeah, that's the same thing. Can you provide me with an example of it? And sometimes they'll go away and they'll obtain usually a redacted version. We don't need anything that is confidential, that we're looking at ways that they can demonstrate where they've applied it in the workplace. With vocational education, what it's about, Colleen, is what you know and what you can show. And it does come sometimes, and this is something we've noticed with members that have left the workplace and haven't been able to get copies of their examples of what they've done. There are times when they just can't provide the evidence. And we try to think outside the square. And we look for other opportunities, but we may have to say, look, recognition of prior learning is all about building this portfolio of evidence. And in this case here, training might be the better outcome because we just can't prove to the requisite standard that I know you've done it, I can hear that you've done it, but it all comes down to being able to prove it. So that process, from talking to an individual, asking them to provide us with their basic details, resume, PDs, courses that they've done, we'll have a turnaround time within 48 hours. We'll have been able to come back and say, based on your materials, these qualifications are looking like a fit for you. And that's when we open up more conversation, because, Colleen, there will be qualifications that we'll be able to identify and offer that a person might say to us, you know what, I'm not going to work in the public sector again. I don't want to be an investigator again. So that diploma of government investigations, I'm really chuffed that I could get it, but it's really of no value. It's not going to take me any further. But that one there would be one that might have been on the list. And we'll still say to them, if you were to enrol, we would issue you this qualification. And they will go, great, thanks, but I don't want it. I don't need it.
Yeah.
But you know what? The leadership and management, and this is one of the things when I go back to our conversation earlier where I said there was 900 qualifications. What we've tried to do is pick qualifications that are transferable across multiple industries. I quickly mentioned before the chap who had left the police, became a CEO, and now works in the work health and safety in the mines. You need qualifications that are transferable across industries and sectors. Our next job is not going to be our job that we retire on. So if we're going to leverage our policing, emergency services, first responder experience, if we're going to leverage that into the future, we want the best bang for buck. And because my policing experience, my policing qualifications were so tailored and so relevant to the police, that was all they were good for. The ones that we offer are qualifications that will take you into those next 1, 2, or 3 career changes that you may have. So that's one of the true outcomes. And also, so it's a simple system that we've created. We have a quick turnaround time. Now, if you came to me, Colleen, and said, I want to get that qualification, for Fortum members, we'll fast track it and we're able to issue the qualification within 7 days. Our normal turnaround time is within 14 days, we'll have the qualification issued. That timing is important because a lot of applications have timeframes on them. People are looking at applying for jobs. There is a closing date. Usually the best one you want to find, you always find it on the last day. You're madly pulling to get your application. Can we get something happening in a quick period of time? Absolutely. How do we make it happen? Well, it all comes down to working with the individual and getting that evidence.
Yeah.
But like with some of the clients that we've shared with you, once we've done that preliminary assessment and said you would be good to go on these qualifications, they can just go away and bank that information. Well, what do I mean by that? We'll honour our assessment that they're able to obtain if they were to enrol, because there's a difference between we haven't completed the formal academic assessment. What we've done is a preliminary overview to say, I know that based on your submission, that if you were to enrol, the outcome would be that we could issue that qualification. But I can share with them, this is the qualifications that ultimately we would issue. And some people take 6 months to make the next decision, and that's okay.
Which probably leads me into the next question then. Once you've told me what qualifications that I would be eligible to get, can I put them on my resume?
Yeah. So the answer is no, because we actually haven't issued the qualifications. As a registered training organisation, Churchill Education is just like a TAFE college, except we're a private organisation. And any qualification that's issued by one of the 4,500 RTOs in Australia is registered with the federal government. So the risk that you run by putting that qualification on your resume is that employers, as part of their shortlisting process, will reach out and check with the colleges or the TAFEs to find out if you've stated that you hold a diploma in leadership and management. One of the steps they'll do is just to confirm that that qualification's been issued. There is also a federal register called the Unique Student Identifier, or USI. So no, I wouldn't recommend putting it on your resume because it's not correct. You haven't been issued the qualification. You're partway through with us. So no.
Okay, thank you. In terms of cost, what does it cost? And can you talk about payment plans and how does that work? Do I have to buy all of them?
No. So the cost, first of all, is we do a free preliminary assessment. So there is no risk and no cost to go through the exercise. There's some of your time to sometimes go off and collate the information. But from a dollars and cents perspective, to get the preliminary assessment done, there is no cost. You want to know, first of all, is Churchill the right fit for you? Are the qualifications the ones that you really can see value in? If you then wish to go ahead and obtain the qualifications, the fees are all published on our website. We've made it quite easy, is that we just base each qualification on the same. Certificate for qualification is $1,295, regardless of what training package it comes from. Certificate 3 is $995. A diploma is $1,695. An advanced diploma is $1,995. And then we also go up to graduate diplomas, which are above a bachelor but below a master's, and they're $3,500. Sometimes people can be overwhelmed because we will come back and remembering that our clients are using the recognition of prior learning, they do have a number of years experience. So we don't work with someone that's just out of high school. You're not going to be able to use the RPL model on that because you just pure and simple don't have the experience. So we can come back to clients and say, look, based on your experience, there are 5 qualifications that we can help you with. In some cases, people do take the 5 qualifications. They are investing in their future and they can see the value in it. At other times, you've still got other competing costs like family expenses and that sort of thing. So they might just take 1 qualification. We do have a different payment plans. We have just a traditional one where you can split the payment over 3 months and we will issue the qualification on the final payment. There's also a lender called study loans, which basically like a personal loan where they lend money to the client. There's credit card. And then there are at times, depending on how you're exiting from, whether it's policing or another agency, sometimes there is, we've had clients come through where work cover have actually covered the cost of their qualification. So it just depends. There are other funding opportunities out there that can also help in covering the cost.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you very much for explaining that. Now, is there anyone who has any questions that would like to ask of Randall? Luke.
I've got a question, Randall. In regard to any, say, training gaps that you have, say you're going for a Cert 4 diploma and you've gone, oh, you need some evidence of this, but they don't have any evidence of that, then is there training that you would provide to cover that, or would you suggest they go somewhere else to get that requirement, or what's the process?
Yeah, great question, Luke. In those situations there, first thing that we're going to do is try and think outside the square. So our model is through 100% recognition of prior learning. And it's in that early preliminary assessment stage that we can identify that a person may have gaps and they just cannot provide the evidence. In those instances there, we'll guide them off to a provider who is best suited to deliver that gap training to them. Our model is that we would first of all like to be able to think outside the square. We know that we're not the right fit always, but we're not going to be delivering that gap training. So we're focusing on 100% RPL. We have a very high success rate with that. But I think some of the challenges people have had in the past, Luke, is that when you're leading an organisation, and when I left the police, I never thought that on the last day that I worked that I actually was on my way out. And so by the time I'd realised that I needed to get some information to prove stuff, I was locked out of the system. So there are times where people have the experience but are just never going to be able to get access to that information again. I can have the conversations, I can hear from them that they are competent to that level, we just can't prove it. I'll guide them off to a provider that's going to deliver that gap training if we can't plug that gap through other ways. But when we start thinking about, there are testimonials, third-party evidence that they might be able to get. So it's not, sometimes it can be very restricted, but if we think outside the square, we can usually plug the gap. But I'm definitely going to say that if we're not the right fit, we'll warm introduce them across to another provider that can.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions that anyone may have? No questions. We must have been very thorough, Randall.
I'm very open to talking to people offline as well, Colleen, and we've been doing that with you regularly.
Thank you.
If you reach through Colleen or Fortum, we have a very quick turnaround time and a high priority for a dedicated team member who works on the Fortum files. So we can really connect quickly, have that conversation. You'll have my details as well. I'm only a phone call away. I think one of the strengths is that have the conversation. There's no cost there. We can share a story and share and arrive at a solution, and hopefully we might be the right fit, but there are lots of other providers out there that can work with you. I think it's just gathering that knowledge and information. And I think one of the takeaways that I'm hearing again, and I love the word, is leveraging. And we undersell ourselves, and don't. You just need to go through the exercise.
Yes, absolutely. I know for the participants that I work with that have gone through this process, just simply going through the process helps them to articulate and see the skills and experience that they can have and how it's translating into other opportunities for them. Yeah. They would never have ever considered that was possible.
And there's some really great feel-good stories that come out of these as well. I think we also undersell ourselves, and if we're reaching out to support services to get some guidance, these pieces of paper can be a massive lift. And then they become the raving fans when they share their stories of, I transitioned successfully, and with dignity, and we're not burnt out. We can transition, we can move into the next chapter of our life. It's going to look different, and that's okay. But we're not going to close off the last 10, 20 years that we gave to service. Hey, it's our time now to get the pat on the back and step forward.
Absolutely.
There's a life outside. I said this yesterday, Colleen, but there's life after the job.
Yes, there certainly is.
Massive life after the job.
Yeah.
And all it takes is a phone call.
Absolutely. So certainly encourage people to get all their certificates and courses and everything that you've done in service to keep that up to date. Yeah. So that if you decide to apply and go through the process of RPL, that you have all of those, because it's obviously a lot more efficient and quicker to do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask? You can pop them in the chat.
I'm just thinking further, if there was some gaps, and this is going to tie back into your question, Luke, I had this conversation just this morning with the senior sergeant, is for people that are not leaving, but they've got an exit plan in mind, if there are gaps, we will guide them on, if in the next 6 months, if there's an opportunity that you can go and plug that gap by actually applying that in the workplace. For example, it might be, rosters, for example. So you never had to do a roster before or a budget or something along those sort of lines. Is there an opportunity in the next 6 months where you are that you might be able to go and step up into that higher duties or relieve or something like that? And they've used that 6 months to go and gain that skill set to be able to come back and go, well, here it is. I've actually applied it in the workplace. That's thinking outside the square. It's not a hard and fast, we're locked in on this outcome today. There's different ways to go about plugging those gaps and banking the evidence as what you've just described just there, Colleen.
Yeah, just on that also, just to add to that a little bit, could you also, if you needed to fill a gap where you didn't have the physical piece of paper to say, well, this is what I've done, could you use a referee that you would contact that would provide that evidence for you, that you have completed those duties and that sort of thing that would lead to that RPL? Is that a possibility of doing that?
That's referred to as a third-party report, absolutely. And there's other things called like competency conversations. So you're having a conversation.
Say that slowly, don't you?
Yeah, competency conversation. So you're having a conversation with one of our assessors who's going to be talking to you about it. And we've even, a bit different with the policing ones, but we've had clients that have said, look, I can show it to you on my desktop. I just can't print this stuff out. So they'll screen share with us, demonstrate this is what I do here, here, and here. That becomes evidence. It's demonstrating to the assessor. So yes, the thinking outside the square is more than just finding it on a piece of paper. But we also know that at times people may not have been exposed to that small thing that's required, and it might be a case that yes, training and assessment is the better pathway. So we'll share that up front very quickly with someone. They're not left running around in circles and wait. We don't want to waste their time. We really want to make it a great experience and also guide them off to the next piece of the puzzle.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Randall. If nobody else has any questions, we'll close it there. If you would like to go through the RPL process, please reach out to myself or to your case manager that you're working with, and we can certainly, would be a pleasure to help you with getting your recognition of prior learning. Thank you everyone for being here today, and I hope that's been helpful. And thank you once again, Randall, for your time.
Thanks, Colleen. Appreciate the time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Randall.